Good morning to all. Today I have a topic that it's been kind of in my head for multiple years now, for a couple of years, and I've kind of felt a certain way about it, and it's been it's been kind of ruminating in my head where I've heard a lot of statistics and arguments and a lot of movements that promote this topic, and I've always felt like there are some fallacies associated with it, and there is a lot of misinformation going around and a wrong idea of what this thing actually is. And what I'm going to talk about, if you didn't get from the title, is veganism and vegetarianism, but veganism more specifically, because I feel like veganism is a slightly more radical side of thing, whereas I feel like in India, where we live, it's vegetarianism is very common. It's like, I don't know the exact statistics, but if I were to guess, it would be around 40 to 60% of the Indian population is vegetarian. Okay, veganism has been becoming more and more popular over the last 5 or 6 years. I remember looking at a statistic where in the US the chain called Whole Foods, it's increased massively. Like I think it's doubled or something in the span of 5 or 6 years, and from I think it was 2013 to 2019, if I'm not wrong. Don't quote me on this. And that and once I like to say this a lot, and I think it's very true, is that we look to the West a lot for new movements that are taking place, and we tend to adopt them within a few years. And we have started to see vegan movements taking place in India. I have multiple friends who either want to be vegan or are already vegan, and I feel like there is this rhetoric that veganism is it's a very positive thing, and it's very good for you, and in some sense I do believe that it is, but I just kind of wanted to break down the different arguments for veganism and give my take on them. So the first one is the okay, it's the environment. So the first thing that people like to talk about when they talk about veganism is environment, and this is a very common argument, and I feel I don't have any statistics on me right now, but from what I have looked at, there's a lot of misleading information. So specifically, people will. So there is like this very popular thing, and I faced this in school as well. So when I was in the 7th grade, the 8th grade, 9th grade, whenever I'd have teachers talking about these things, it seemed very much like just another fact to kind of make children go like, oh my god, wow, this is a crazy statistics, when they don't really know the details of it. So this one is when it comes to talking about water, when you produce something. So say for example, it takes 1500 liters to produce 1 kilogram of beef, of like a beef patty, and it sounds crazy. 1500 liters is a lot. That means like 1500 like big ass Bisleri bottles, and it sounds crazy, but when you really look in, because like everything, there is always a nuance to every little statistic that you get, and people will tell you how much water is used and what amount of water is used, but they'll never tell you why it is that way, why so much is used. And often when I would ask, or someone else would ask, or it would be brought up, and the teacher wouldn't have an answer. I feel like this is a problem that people this is a thing people struggle with in general, not just in the debate of whether veganism is good or not. It's that people take statistics and facts for what they are on the surface level, and they don't actually look deeper into them. When people look at suicide rates for men and women, they'll see that oh, men make up so much more of women. But then if you delve deeper into it and you look at why that happens, you'll see that women actually attempt suicide way more than men. That's a separate topic. I just feel like it's something that needs to be discussed a lot more. So with water specifically, what I've learned is through my recent research is that most water that is counted in those in whatever in like those research and those details that you and the statistics, it's green water, which means that it comes from the plants that absorb the rainwater, and those plants are consumed by the cattle or the livestock, and that makes up a large portion of it. And there's also, so yeah, it's mostly got to do with rainwater. And then you have other arguments that people make, which are to do with land. So a lot of very blatantly leftist media. I'm not trying to make this like left-right kind of debate, because I don't identify with either. But you'll see a lot of media companies like Vox, for example. Was it Vox or Vice? I don't know. I'm pretty sure it was Vox, because Vice doesn't make that type of content really. But Vox, there was they showed like some really misleading statistics saying that that the land use for farms and crops is around 1/4 of the land that is used for livestock. And there's various reasons for that. One is the soil doesn't really support the growth of crops, whereas that same soil would be far more efficient at growing livestock. So you won't be able to have the right crops growing in that soil. So there is no option of taking away the livestock and putting crops in that area. There is no option. Or in a lot of cases, I think around 2/3, if I'm not wrong, please don't quote me on any of these statistics, do your own research. 2/3 of farmland, so this includes crops and livestock, around 2/3 of that is given to livestock. And another reason for, I need to take some water, my throat keeps drying up. And the reason for that is a lot of those areas are quite hilly, so you don't have the flat land that is required to grow crops. And I've actually never seen, aside from tea leaves, I've never seen crops being grown on like a hilly area. That's just like a personal thing of mine. This coffee is good. And yeah, so that's one thing that a lot of people talk about, which I feel like has a lot of fallacies within. So you aren't really talking about what really is going on, why it's going on. You're just giving statistics to scaremonger and confuse more people. And I think that's very unfair on the majority of people who want to convert to veganism. The next thing is animal welfare. Now, I don't know the details of this, and I don't know the statistics or whatever it is, but from what I know, I actually have my own personal takes on things like animal cruelty. But from what I know in India, if you're an Indian and you're trying to be more like vegan friendly or whatever, and you're trying to consume less meat or dairy products, because of animal cruelty, you're not, I really don't think you're doing that much of a job. Because if you actually go to these places, I have gone to these places multiple times, you will see, so there's this culture around cows in India and Hinduism where we really respect cows and all of that stuff. And there's also an element of having halal foods, which is cruelty-free killing of animals for their consumption. So they'll try, this is from what I know, they'll try and make the death of the animals as painless as possible. And I think in most places where you will get meat, you will see that these places they're quite friendly for, in terms of animal. Like there's very little animal cruelty. I've been to farms, like people from my family who own farms. I've visited their farms. I've gone there, and obviously like it's very, you can't really tell as an outsider. Like you're having a fucking, they're not gonna show like the dudes who are fucking strangling the cows or something. But from what I've seen, heard, and like what I actively see, there really isn't that much of a situation where there is like a lot of animal cruelty. So in India specifically, I'm talking about. Other countries, I don't know. I don't really understand or know much about their culture around animal cruelty. But I feel like in India there really isn't much of an argument that you not consuming meat will actively lead to less animal cruelty. I really don't think that is, because we also have like a very like farmer sort of culture, and people are getting more aware of the issues that farmers face and the economics of farmers in India. Okay, so the next thing, what was I going to talk about? So I talked about misleading statistics, animal cruelty, and there was something else. Let me take a sip. There was a third thing, but I think these two are pretty much my main arguments. I think there are a lot of so I want to talk about like the media that promotes things like veganism, and so they like, even I don't care if your message is a positive message and you're encouraging people to do positive things. I feel like it's very wrong if you give people statistics which are very misleading. I don't think anyone appreciates that, especially people who find out afterwards that you've been using these statistics as a mean, not even if you didn't mean to mislead anyone. If you're not providing them with the whole picture, I feel like I've made this mistake, and I feel like I still continue to make this mistake, but at least I'm conscious about it. I'm trying to change it. And there's too many people who make the mistake of taking statistics for the surface level, for exactly what they are, and that is something that I never appreciate, and it's not fair. Yes, also I wanted to talk about alternatives to vegan products. So a lot of times people talk about how many resources livestock uses and stuff like that, but if you consider the byproducts of alternatives to dairy, so things like almond milk, stuff like that, really, they all have byproducts that are not edible by humans. Like, we cannot cultivate these and create food out of them. So what you'll often see is that these byproducts are given back to the livestock, and the livestock consume them, and there is further, and the livestock grow, and then they can provide food that is far more nutritious. Yes, that is the other thing that I want to talk about, is the nutritional value of dairy alternatives. Now, you may or may not know this, but the general population is basically protein deficient, and a lot of our diets, especially the Indian diet, especially if you're Indian and vegetarian, your diet is comprised of mostly carbs. And carbs are good. Carbs are great for fitness. They're great to keep you healthy and happy, and I consume a lot of carbs on a daily basis. But what I feel like a lot of people don't talk about enough is that there's different types of protein, and especially if you're into weightlifting like I am and you want to build muscle, then you need to realize that not all protein is the same. So even if like, you can say that, oh, I'm a vegan weightlifter and I consume like lentils and like dal, chickpeas, stuff like that. it's not the same as consuming a lot of meat, because one, meat is way more dense. Meat and eggs are also, in case you didn't know, there are artificially grown eggs, which my family considers vegetarian. I don't consider vegetarian, but it is what it is. My family is more vegetarian than I am. They consider that vegetarian and I don't, which it's kind of ironic. But yeah, so first, meat is far more dense in protein. Second, it contains different amino acids which you won't find in other forms of protein. So I don't know the specifics, but like, say you have 5 or 6 different types of amino acids. You might find only 3 or 4 of them, 2 or 3 of them in things like lentil, dal, chole, rajma, stuff like that, and you won't gain those certain amino acids unless you have other forms of protein. And yeah, I like another thing people don't really seem to understand is that if I have like 5 kilograms of a crop and 5 kilograms of meat, then those are two very different things. Like 5 kilograms of meat is a lot of calories, and it's a lot of food, and that will be far more nutritious than you consuming 5 kilograms of rice. So there's a very big difference in how these things work. And again, yeah, I feel like there are so many misconceptions, and people really just take things for what they are on the surface value when it comes to veganism. I had journaled about a couple things that I wanted to talk about: being mindful, accountability, neutral perspectives, and vegan. So yeah, veganism. I'm gonna try and talk about these other 3 topics soon, but yeah, I just wanted to talk about veganism really quickly. Okay, so positive side of veganism, I feel like veganism is, as a whole, I feel like if it's not something that people incorporate into a large scale, so I'm talking like 30, 40, 50% of the population, if that amount of people are vegan, then I don't think that's a good thing. But like at where veganism is right now, I think it's at a healthy thing. And I'm not gonna argue against the idea that there are negatives to having a lot of livestock. There absolutely are. Like there have got to be negatives to having excess meat production and consumption. But in India, I feel like veganism really isn't anything we should be thinking about, because so much of our population is already vegetarian, and kind of reduce and taking in Western concepts because they're Western concepts, and I don't know if people follow them because solely over the fact that they're Western concepts, but more over the fact that it's their personal choice. I don't know if that's the reason why people do it, but regardless, I feel like we need to have a separation between the West and our personal values, talking about Indians here. And we often get caught up in Western politics because they do affect us to an extent, but I feel like it's like a spiral, because you get caught up in Western politics, you're influenced by them, and that causes you to influence society here, and then that kind of leads the rest of society to also follow Western politics, and it's kind of like a spiral. I wouldn't say a downward spiral, but it's like a feedback loop. That's what it is, a feedback loop. I also feel like if the entire world went vegetarian or vegan, that would not be good, because we, as humans, we have not evolved into herbivores. We have been omnivores for thousands of years, and I don't think we will evolve fast enough to keep up with the idea of having only, like, as it is. This is a topic that I wanted to talk about outside of this, but I'll talk about it a little bit here. people do not realize how abnormal it is to have medical conditions, to have illnesses. You look at monkeys, right? Most monkeys will be happy and healthy, and they'll like have lives, live them, like they'll do their own thing, and they'll die. If you think about it, how many issues, mental or physical, have you had? How many issues do you go through on a daily basis in terms of your own health? This is not natural. If you consider, if you consider people thousands of years ago, when people were living in tribes, I don't know the statistics, but like, if you think about in terms of evolutionary science, there can't have been more people who were ill than there are right now. You think about our surroundings, the places where we live in, like these sedentary lifestyles. Why are there so many obese people? Why are there so many people with mental illness? Why are there so many people who literally cannot get off their seat without using their arms? That is not natural. You look at a fucking monkey, like using all four limbs just to get up from a seated. Obviously, monkeys are different from humans, but like I think you kind of get what I'm trying to say. Like thousands of years ago, you wouldn't need your arms to get off your chair. That is not natural. Man, my throat is really hurting. These are things we need to start thinking about more. And all I'm seeing is that if you speak against the general left, again, I don't want to make this like a left and a right thing, but if you look at the general left, the consensus around what is good and what is wrong, so things like, I really don't want to get into like trans politics, but if you say anything that is against the norm in terms of being talking about trans people, non-binary people, if you talk about veganism in the wrong way, then you are very much looked down upon, when this is exactly what we should be doing. This is exactly what the left was made. I don't want to go into a rant. I will talk about that soon. I will make notes and I will talk about my issue with politics in 2023 as a whole separately. But yeah, I think I've spoken enough. My throat hurts. I need to get this checked out because